And then hopefully, I think I was able to add a question app so that if anybody watches, they can
Yeah.
ask some questions and stuff just in case. So that should be it. So hopefully we'll see what happens. See
Should I
how it
grab
goes.
like the only two specific settings or Fate books that I own?
Yeah, sure, you can.
Like
Yeah, we can.
physical copies, because everything else is in PDFs.
That's all I have. Sure. Yeah, you can hold it up. Yeah.
Might as well talk about the weird Fate games.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. I wanna try to touch base with everything that we can in a time, because I figure if we go for about an hour, that'll
Cool.
I think that'll be good. Then you guys can get some sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll touch base, and then like I said, I just wanted to I kind of jotted a few things down that I wanted to talk about, and we should be able to do it.
Cool. I'll grab that real quick.
Okay. John, how's everything going over there?
The problem with being someone who's niche and picky.
Mm-hmm.
There are many problems.
Yes, there are many problems with it, but like I like a system, but then I only like to use a particular system for particular kinds of settings, and so
Oh wow.
there's only actually very few Fate products that I ran. I just use like a core system to just do one shots of random genre cravings.
Well, that's one of the things that we may talk about. Is that being that it's kind of it was introduced as kind of like a core system or toolbox rather.
Mm-hmm.
One of the and it's fine, but initially I'll put it like that. Initially, one of my issues with Fate was that the various supplements and genres and books and everything, they've all been tweaked so much that the mechanics are very specific for those genres.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's nice sometimes with other RPG products to be able to kind of use an idea or a mechanic or something else from one genre and put into another or mash them together to make your own kind of hybrid thing. I like doing that. So
Savage Worlds and GURPS comes to mind.
there you go. Yeah, exactly. yeah.
GURPS is probably king of that. It just takes a while for you to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you all the building blocks. The problem is there's a lot of building blocks.
There's a lot of building blocks. Yeah.
It's one of those games where sort of once you've sort of cracked it and you understand it, or like you say, you can do an awful lot with it, but sort of getting past that initial that sort of hurdle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It can be quite difficult.
1.5 to 2 year mastery period kind of throws the people off.
Right. Basic RPG is another one like that. It's another huge tool set. Well, okay. Let me try to stick to this kind of outline I got here. We'll see how it works. I guess initially what I wanted to do was I wanted to get you guys' viewpoints on just kind of like story-centric gaming in general, because it seems like that's a topic that kind of keeps coming around, various forums and on YouTube and everything. And one thing that I noticed, I haven't posted a video response about it because it seems like usually watching everyone else's responses gets me thinking about something else, and then something else, and then something else, and that's something I got to work on. But one thing I noticed is that, personally, I think that I fall into the camp of story definitely overrules dice for me. I think that it's just very important to have an understanding or an agreement even with your players that I guess it ultimately comes down to what type of one shot or what type of game or what you're trying to do, you know. And it seems like it's a very fine line at times because in a lot of cases with me trying to recruit players from online that I have they're strangers to me basically, you know. A lot of reactions that I've gotten if I say that this campaign or this one shot or whatever is going to be about a story and if possible a cooperative story, I get a lot of negative feedback about that sometimes, you know. And that's one of the things I kind of wanted to brush upon as well, you know, why that is. And why it seems like some tabletop game fans kind of you know, shrink back at the idea of a game being or a campaign or whatever being, you know, story centric. You know.
Hey guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey James, how's it going?
It's going great.
Good, good.
It's an interesting question. Like I'm new to this hobby mostly, and the more that yeah, relatively new. I started playing like maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
No, really, yeah.
But you know what? That's probably good because you don't have a lot of preconceived notions.
Exactly, yeah. And like the more that I play, the more that I lean towards like narrative-heavy kind of story type games, and even like the only system I know is D&D 5e, and so like I've been using that in a diceless way and stuff to try and get it to be more narrative and less crunchy. I'm really not a fan of like slowing down the game for combat. That's something that really bothers me about D&D is that you've got, especially with players who want to have a narrative story, they play really narratively, and then you go, okay, so a 19, that's good, okay, yeah, and then okay, 10 points, and it's just like it takes you out of the moment completely and makes you just do a lot of maths, which I'm not a fan of, you know.
Well, a lot of people, you know, I think of it, unfortunately, I think of it as kind of evolved versus unevolved, and that's probably the wrong way to think about it. I think of Fate and Fate-like being more real to storytelling roots, where you're not bogged down by a system or you're not bogged down by mechanics. You're driven by, you know, what's the story? You know, Lloyd, what's your character like? Well, he's big and strong, and he's good in a fight, and he's a pugilist, and he's this and that. So you can kind of get a picture of what the guy is versus, well, he's got a 14 strength, and he gets +2 to hit when he's unarmed.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
that's great. And it just seems like there's such a schism between the people who want to have a mechanic or a stat for everything versus, you know, and those guys think that the Fate people are just these hand-wavy, diceless, emo kids who are just sitting around telling a story. It's like, oh, I'm sad. Well, I don't want you to be sad, Lloyd. Well, okay, what do you do? Well, you know, I'm going to rub your back, and now you're going to get a buff, and you're not going to be sad anymore. You know, versus, well, I want to heal you, so I roll and boom, you're healed, 14 points of damage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes down to how much people like the sort of tactical side of gaming. I mean, I'm not a big sort of tactical sort of miniatures, measuring out all of the sort of area of effect of a spell and stuff like that. I think that as games are sort of independent RPGs have become sort of more professional looking and they're more easily available via things like drive-through RPG, that there are companies that are a bit willing to explore sort of trying different things with role-playing games. I think the sort of the larger companies, they've obviously, the incentive for them is not to move too far from their sort of core demographic. I mean, just to use that D&D 5e as an example, although I think they have streamlined it a lot, and I certainly like the look of the new version of D&D, they're never going to move it too far away from that sort of it being recognisably D&D, because I mean, as we saw with the outcry with 4th edition from a lot of people, when they do that, their sort of core demographic that their profits depend on don't like it, so there's no incentive there for them to do that, whereas a smaller company who are bringing out something like a PDF or something, or like Fate, where originally it was just a PDF where you could pay what you want to get the core book, they're more willing to try sort of moving into slightly different areas of roleplay.
But Red Dice, the fate or fatism, as I call it, seems to have insinuated itself all around. And, you have, what do they call it? Grognards? Is that the term? So they have the grognards that are just so resistant to anything fate-like. Soon as they see something like a plot point or a fate point, or you make the term, well, this is going to be a narrative. Their hackles kind of pop up, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're not going to do that goofy fate stuff.
But why do you think that there's that inherent kind of resistance to that, though?
Because the same reason why you have people who are left-brained or right-brained, you have people who are kind of math-driven or centric, you have people who are kind of more artistic. Most of the people are going to fit somewhere in between, but you have to remember, well, I myself, I've been playing the hobby for, how long, David? We've been playing maybe 35 years there or so. Yeah. So, when we started, there wasn't a lot of rules. You're an elf and you have a sword, and you have to kind of make everything up with it. But as time passed, there's a rule for this. You're facing this way. Your weapon is a weapon speed factor X, and all of this other stuff. It just kind of got complicated and kind of gotten away from what I think is the heart of role playing, which is to tell the story, progress the story. The story should be hero-centric, or rather protagonist-centric, because it might be interesting to have a story where you're not a hero. But I don't think that the people who are far to the left, meaning the mechanical, tactical people, can see that far off into the fate and see the value of fate, even though fate is kind of little by little going into everyone's games now.
Yeah, but go ahead.
I think there's like an element of trust as well, where like the mechanics are really good for resolution of issues. If you've got like in combat, like this is one of the things, like I really like diceless games, but in combat you need a lot of trust in people to say like, okay, you've taken damage, and you're like, okay, I'm fine with that, even though there's no dice been rolled, So like when you have dice, you've got agency. So like every attack you make, every attack that comes at you, you've got like proof that it's happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but what happens, Lloyd, when you are playing and I'm the GM and we're at a table? Say we're at a table, and I roll the dice, and boom, you take 18 points of damage, but your guy only has 10 hit points. So now you're dead.
Oh, it's absolutely not perfect.
So now the story is about you and your buddies, gathered at the table, but now you're dead, and you need to make another character, or I, as the GM, I have to come up with some laudable excuse as to why you're not dead, and then you say, all right, Jim, you kind of hand wave that. You hit me, the dice said 18 points of damage, and I only have 10 hit points. What the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, how's it going? Welcome, man.
Thank you very much.
We're just to kind of get you in here. We're just kind of, I just introduced some general questions, just, about narrative-centric or story-centric gaming in general.
Sure.
Not any particular system or mechanic or anything. And I was just curious to get some of you guys' reaction or comments about some of the either positive or even negative kind of connotations or what you may have heard about narrative forward games in general, and why maybe some games get a bad rep,
Yeah, definitely, and I guess I'll jump in. It sounds like I'm having a little feedback. Is that a problem?
No, it's not too bad. I think you're okay.
Okay, cool, because I can always put my headphones on if it becomes an issue.
Okay.
No, I guess my thing with that is, this may or may not be a cop-out-ish kind of answer, but I mean, any game setting or system, I think, can be a narrative game/system. I do think that you can make the argument that some systems cater to that element. or those elements, or can do a better job of it. But at the same time, at the end of the day, a GM or DM or anyone around the table can make of a system what they will. That being said, one of the things that I love about this particular system of Fate is that I feel that it kind of builds in to the logic of the game system, the mechanics, that, hey, we're going to be trying to drive things in an narrative fashion. We're going to try to make you think about things not as strictly numbers, but as narrative concepts. That's what aspects essentially are. They're narrative concepts that have a mechanical benefit. Whereas in certain games, like for me, like a D&D, for example, where you have the mechanics and you have the narrative, and they can be slightly divorced, especially in editions that I remember playing more often, which was like, advanced many years ago, and I've only started recently re-looking at it again. But yeah, that would be my initial thought on that, and you guys can tell me if I'm crazy or not.
No. That's it makes sense to me. I don't know, Joseph, you've been kind of quiet over there. You have any have any thoughts?
Rip into me, Joseph. No, I'm just kidding. Don't. You hurt my feelings.
Oh no. It's weird someone calling me that. I'm used to people calling me Chepe online.
Okay,
but,
I'll call you Cheppy if you want.
Oh, fine, Cheppy.
Chepe, yeah. Chepe is typically my handle online. Lloyd knows. He got confused for a while too.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's fine. Well, that's how the ruling over rules and the fudging argument happened to begin with. Typically, when DMs do fudge dice, it's for narrative purposes. It's typically in favor of someone because they didn't want something to happen. Like, they're trying to avoid that moment where there was going to be a huge dramatic finishing blow and they just flop all over themselves. Something like that.
But so, it's interesting, Chepe, that you bring that up, though, because then, and I think this was brought up in a series of videos this week about the idea of fudging, and do you do it, and is it positive or negative, and what's the connotation of it. It's like, it seems to be, especially in the more mechanically driven, or like John said, tactical systems, that is considered a bad thing, that if you do it, then you are a bad DM or a bad GM and should be more swept through the streets, kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, you need to do it as a GM because you have a story. When I GM, I put together a number of scenes, and the scenes may not, they're definitely not going to be linear, but if I have an outcome that I require from a scene, there's going to be a certain amount of railroading because players, being what they are, do not go for the obvious. They start to drift off. And, say I have a forgotten temple that I need them to find the map to, and then they decide, hey, we're going to go off and kill these bandits instead of, searching where the obvious clues are. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden I need to put the map in the bandits' hands, which will lead them back to the forbidden or the forgotten temple. So, they may not want to do a forgotten temple. You know what I mean? So, you need a certain amount of fudging in order to keep the story going, because it's just like a movie. I mean, if you think about it, that's how I think about it, as a movie. And unfortunately, that can cause some linear thinking. But, I have a scene. That scene needs to be resolved before you can move to the next scene, before you can move to, a couple scenes after that.
But James, the beauty of what you just said is that in most systems that's considered railroading.
Right.
And in Fate, I can simply compel all of the players, and they have to do what I say if they want to.
Right. Which some people hate.
And cost themselves a valuable resource.
But John, some people hate that because they feel that you're taking player agency away from you. Are controlling my character, not understanding that.
Buy it off then.
well, no. The thing about it is that the drama is what makes your character. The situations that they're put in for the bad are just the same as the good. They're spurring the story along.
Yeah, and this as well with compels as well. They're normally obviously related to aspects which are chosen by the player to relate to that character. So my argument would be that if you didn't want complications to arise from those aspects, then you'd have picked different aspects effectively.
But you have people who pick crappy aspects, and they try to make it so that there's no negative in their aspects. That it only has an upside, not a downside. And sometimes
I think anything can be flipped around to have a negative side with a bit of sort of thought, really. I think it'd be very difficult to get something that's entirely positive.
And maybe we should take a moment to kind of move the topic, since it's kind of drifting there anyway, move the conversation to that topic of the idea of aspects,
Right.
What they are, why they are so important, and how to build good ones. Because I think the biggest question that I get from even people who've played Fate before are, how do I make this aspect? What's this aspect? Is this aspect any good? Help me out here, and
Well, how about this, John? How about the question that should everything have aspects? Does everything need to have an aspect? Because
it's fractally fracted.
Well, because the thing about it is that for a newbie Fate GM, they may get overwhelmed by saying, "Oh my God, I have a cell phone. What are the aspects of the cell phone? It's smart, or it's 5G."
Baycore does a good job of that with extra.
Yeah, well, because I gotta, not to interject, guys, but I got a lot of questions in the RPG One Shot group by a lot of people who have never had any experience with any kind of Fate or Fate accelerated game. So right, like Lloyd. Now, and I wasn't aware of this, and I am duly impressed, but Lloyd's only actually been actually role-playing or just GMing for a short time, Lloyd?
Pretty much both, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay, all right. Well, I know that in the 5e campaign that I'm running right now, Lloyd created a monk. And when we were, because for me, Fate has kind of boiled over into all of my other role-playing.
Nice.
I mean, we did a co-op, kind of like a co-op campaign. We had a session, where I asked the players for their input. What would they like to get out of the campaign? What would they like to see? What would they like their characters to encounter, for example? Just a lot of different things in order so that they could build kind of like a relationship together between the characters and a story between the characters, because I hate the old tavern trope. You guys meet in a tavern, what do you do? And I really, one thing that really bugs me is, and I've encountered it a lot, is when you get a group of players and their characters together, how because they have no previous relationships at all, that everyone is super secretive, no one wants to work together as a cohesive unit or a team to get things accomplished. And from a metagaming point of view, we all know that we need to do that in order to move the game forward. That's just, in most cases, that's the nature of how these games are played. Nature
of the beast.
Right. So I remember distinctly when Lloyd was creating his monk. I kind of just asked him, well, what kind of character is he? What do you think he is? And he kind of gave me just a physical and kind of like a personality description, of his character, and I went, wow. I said, you just made a perfect Fate character, and that's his high concept. And it's kind of good because, like James mentioned earlier, Lloyd has no preconceived notions of how he's supposed to role play, or what that means. He doesn't have a preconceived. He's not in a preconceived box, of how he has to relate to RPG games.
Or min-maxing.
That's another aspect of it.
Well, I mean that builds off of that builds off of the mechanic-centric games. Once you have that, you start to munchkinize all that stuff and say, well, why am I going to take this if I can get +3 instead of this where I can get +5?
Well, I think what kind of had a large factor on that was, and I know we've been mentioning good old Dungeons and Dragons a lot here, so I don't want anybody to think we're trashing it,
We're not trashing it, folks.
Right.
We all like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. It's something we're all familiar with. It's common ground. Look at it that way. But one of the things I really hated about the early editions of the game was that they had attribute prerequisites. You couldn't play a paladin unless you rolled this. You couldn't be a bard unless you did this and everything,
And then you had some GMs that made you roll straight up and down. So if you needed a 17 charisma to be be a paladin, you'd never get a paladin.
Well, that's why I also, I'm also a big fan of point buy, so and that's one of the reasons why, But with this latest version of 5e, you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
So I think that the games themselves are evolving to a certain degree where maybe some of that min-maxing and all that kind of stuff will lessen, possibly. I don't know.
They're trying to mitigate it somehow, anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, you guys wanted to talk about like aspects and stuff like that.
I think it'd be a good way to start because getting into some more of the meat because the big topic, and again, like I said earlier, it's the one that I get asked about the most out of everything. So
yeah.
So you mean character aspects, or
sure? Let's start with character aspects.
Scene distinctions, or
well, maybe we should first just define the term for everyone who is new to Fate, who might be watching this later on. Again, they can always look this up in a book, but since we're talking about it, we might as well, before we begin, picking them apart, define what we're saying here a little bit,
Okay. All right. So who wants to give a nice definition that's newbie friendly?
Okay. I've always seen aspects as being story tags that are assigned to your character, describing a facet of your character. So if you're like, I don't know, the fastest gunslinger in the West or whatever, that's a story tag. That tells you something about your character that is factual and is relatable to in the game, that has both positive and negative sides, as opposed to just sort of having like an abstract number written on a piece of paper, which by itself doesn't actually tell you much.
And David hates those. Go ahead and say it, because we played Marvel Heroic a couple of times, and if anyone who's played that, they know that there are distinctions, which are, aspects. So Wolverine is the best there is at what he does. So as soon as you hear that, David says, well, what does that mean? If he's throwing darts, he's the best there is at what he does. If he's shooting pool, he's the best there is at what he does. Yep. He's driving a car. It's like, wait a minute. Where's the downside? So sure, guys will come after you and say, hey, I heard you're the best there is at what you do. We're going to beat you up because we want to test that theory.
Right.
But, some of the aspects are just bloated.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I think it's easy for aspects to be almost a little too generic.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are too generic, they're not meant. You're not meant to be able to have one aspect that covers every situation. They're supposed to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, and I think going back to the idea of the definition of what they are, John said it. I think pretty much as succinctly as you can. They're narrative elements that help define an aspect of a character, of a place, of the world itself, and they drive the greater system that is Fate. And we can leave it at that, and then we'll tear it apart.
Well, I think of them as tags.
Yep.
So that a tag can be a physical characteristic. It could be mental, emotional, a tie that someone may have with something, or that you have. I think moving outside of the obvious makes aspects really, really good. And it's easy to say, I'm the world's most powerful telepath, as I am Charles Xavier, but is he's tortured mentally, or something else like that. You have to kind of throw something else into it to kind of jazz it up.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Philip. Welcome.
How many of these aspects do you get? How does it work? Like, I've never played the game, so...
Well, that really depends on the game in question, but I actually wanted to touch on something that James mentioned earlier real quick before we kind of delve into that concept, Jarl.
Sure.
But he mentioned something earlier. It's like the idea of, and this I think gets addressed pretty much immediately in Fate Core, not so much in Dresden Files RPG, which is what I play. But in Fate Core, it talks about, oh, well, everything has an aspect. Everything is an aspect. You can, if you really want to get crazy with it, it can be the most fractalized world you've ever created, and everything has aspects and all this sort of stuff. And the thing I like about Fate Core is that it says that immediately, pretty much early on in the aspect section of the book, and then from there it defines other pieces of the system that allows you to make that fractal dream a reality. Things like the extras, for example. That's a chapter, I think, toward the back of the book. So to kind of go into your question, Jarl, you can have tons of aspects, but characters themselves tend to have only so many, and we can kind of go.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It kind of,
I think realistically.
Go ahead, Georgia.
I was just going to say, I think realistically, once you get above a certain amount, they tend not to get quite used as much. There's only so many you can actively use. I mean, I know they
Core.
They sort of cut it down with the Fate Core, didn't they?
Yeah.
There are more aspects in previous
it's like
versions
7
of it.
Resin files for a character to start.
Wow, that's a lot.
There were a lot.
3 to 5, I think.
Okay.
8, 4. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing I noticed, GMing one-shots with players that weren't very familiar with, aspects and just, Fate mechanics in general. In some instances, it seemed as though they were having difficulty utilizing those aspects, and so I thought, well, perhaps if they had a larger amount of aspects, say they may have had typically 3, maybe 5 would be a better selection for them to be able to utilize them in the game. I don't know if it comes with just more experience with the mechanics of the game and just understanding how aspects work. I'm not really sure. That was just.
But you know what, Dave? If you have, I think that if you have like scene aspects that are tied to the location where the scene is taking place, that
like what? Give us an example.
A raging fire, a raging inferno, or I'm making a fight scene and it's in a kitchen and there are blades everywhere, so you can imagine that somebody is going to grab a blade and use it to create an advantage for their fighting skill, or if they're having a martial arts duel, you're in a kitchen environment, so you say, well, I want to, there's culinary stuff all around. Is there possibly a boiling vat of oil? Hey, spend a fate point. There it is. You create it. There you go. So that's the kind of stuff.
So fate points act like agency for a player.
Yes.
Absolutely, and for the GM as well.
Yep.
Because basically, and we're not even at the fate points. I think we're still talking about the aspects.
We're still in the aspects phase,
right.
Yeah.
So the aspects kind of give you an idea of what's in the area. So I have a Jeep, and my Jeep is a rugged vehicle. That may be one of his aspects.
So, it could be an extra in this case.
Or it could be an extra, right? So if I'm driving in Chicago where I am and there's snow and cold everywhere, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to tag one of my, I'm going to invoke one of my aspect of rugged vehicle, I'll get off the road and just start going across the terrain. And because it's a rugged vehicle, that gives the agency that it can do something. It's a permission to be able to do something. Now, on the flip side, if we're running down the street and there's a Lamborghini and I'm trying to chase it in my Jeep, David or somebody may compel my rugged vehicle and say, hey, rugged vehicles are not quick. You're never going to catch that Lamborghini, if that makes sense.
And that's why I think the best aspects can be both compelled and invoked,
Well, let's be clear about that, actually, too, David, because it says it, I think, in pretty much any Fate product that you're going to get your hands on. But a good aspect, should be able to be invoked and compelled.
Right.
So when you're sitting there as a new player wondering what do those terms even mean, how do I even achieve that, ask your GM to help you ask them to be thorough in an explanation if they're not understanding, if you're not understanding it, because again, the invoke compel system is an extremely important mechanical aspect of the game. It's pretty much the meat of the game, in my opinion.
I just was going to say that if possible, and of course you guys are all welcome, but what I would like to do sometime in the future is just have like a generic character creation maybe session, you know, where we, and then that way we can actually walk through all the different steps, because if people aren't familiar, we're throwing out terms and stuff, you know. I know this isn't super, you know, hyper organized.
There are a few of those already in existence, actually. I believe Main Man actually did one with a bunch of the other guys with Gothnog when they did the Wild West Fate one-shot.
Oh, okay.
And then also there's another one on Nerdarchy's channel. They played Fate Accelerated, and so I found a few decent like character creation one-shots that I could send people.
You know, one of the things
we can still do one.
We should do one.
One of the things is it's easy. So, you know, people they get, you know, all crazy about the aspect. So you can say, I'm an elvish fighter from Mirkwood. That could be one of the aspects. So, you know, people say, well, what does that mean? So I get it. I'm in the darkness. Well, elves historically in fantasy can see in the dark. So if I'm trying to make a notice roll in the dark, that allows me the permission to do so. Now, if some orcs started to attack us, I could get compelled, my elvishness of that particular aspect could get compelled to where they say, ooh, elf meat, let's kill him first.
And I got to go back to your example for a minute there, James, just to kind of to give people who are, you know, maybe new to Fate who are watching this the idea of, you know, when he's saying it gives you permission to do a thing, in that sense, like in the scene that he just painted, say you're an elf, you know, going through this dark cave, and you're an elf, so elves could probably see in the dark. Let's just say in a fancy trope.
Yes, that would be a pro being an elf.
Yeah, exactly. So James, as the elf, could say, I want to roll my perception skill, but then I also want to invoke my aspect of I'm an elf to get a +2, or maybe to have some effect, or whatever. And that's, we can kind of, I guess we're transitioning into that part of it now too, but that's the invoke and compel system, and there's different advantages to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of you were talking about like aspects.
It sounds almost like what you were saying is that when something is compelled about a certain aspect, that it is in fact a con about that aspect,
correct. Yes.
And will confer a disadvantage.
It's a complication.
It's a complication.
Yeah, it's a complication. Excellent. Excellent term.
Yeah, to go back earlier to what John was saying, basically the best aspects are able to be invoked, i.e. they can give you a bonus to certain things, or they can be compelled, which is they can introduce an additional sort of level of complication or something which sort of basically brings a bit of the plot to your door in the game. So as I was saying with the example with the elf, with the orcs deciding to attack the elf first, obviously that's an additional complication for you because of that, and the invoke would be the positive side, which is the seeing in the dark business.
And for an elf, you know, we know that elves are slight, skinny guys. So, you know, if you have a door that they need to physically break down in a certain amount of time before someone gets to them, and you as the GM decide you want some drama, so you have the elf make the roll, well, you say, hey, GM is going to compel your elfness because, you know, you're a skinny little guy and it's difficult for you to break this door down. Well, whereas the orc who might have brawny barbarian, you know, and he can invoke that to bust the door down.
Well, one thing I think
that seems extremely arbitrary to me.
Well, let me throw that in there. Throw this in here is that also what everyone has to realize who's never played Fate before is that prior to all of this happening, there has to be an understanding between the GM and the players of what it means to be an elf, what it means to be a barbarian, what it means to be an orc, you know, because there are things being inferred through those aspects, you know. Someone might say, well, my elf isn't skinny, you know, my elf is, you know, has wiry strength, you know, or because that's how players are, you know. But it's just something that has to be discussed, you know, during character creation or whatever, so that everyone at the table knows and understands it.
So it's part of the social contract in the beginning.
Right. Take it as a like in the superhero vein, that I have an aspect of the last son of Krypton, Superman, Kal-El. Well, what can Kryptonians do when they're on Earth under the yellow sun? They can do a whole crap load of stuff. They can fly, they're invulnerable, they have super breath, laser vision, I mean, all this other stuff. So, you know, just like David said, you have to buy into it and kind of say, this is what the Kryptonians have. You know, and so that you're just not pulling stuff everywhere.
Only because, like, part of that would be based on the stunts that a person would have to purchase as well to have those extra level ability. But another thing that we want to talk about that kind of follows off what David said real quick is the idea of the talking aspect of it. It's like when you build the aspect, sure, you're going to talk about it, but the other important thing to remember is that when you're invoking or compelling, that's a discussion, that's a negotiation between the GM and the player that's trying to do that, or between the GM and the player who the GM is trying to do something to. So I could turn around and say, in the scenario with the elf, where there's a band of orcs, and they all of a sudden want to attack only the elf because he's an elf, and then they're a enemy, right? Well, I'm saying to the elf, James's character in this instance, that, oh, hey, James, for a fate point, for a narrative power point, basically, I will have all these orcs barrel towards you to attack you, but you'll get a fate point out of it.
And I will take the currency or deny.
Or you buy it off.
Or I buy it off.
A fate point. So there's that transaction. It's a transaction. It's not just me as the GM saying, well, you're an elf, therefore the orcs are going to gangbang you now, and you're going to death. You know what I mean? So don't want to leave that impression with anybody who's watching this who doesn't know about it. Like, it's not just I have free, you know, reign to railroad you.
Right, because that is one of the concerns I've heard, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have no fate points.
Well,
then that's different. Then you should have played better.
That's the catch, you know. That's the catch as well. Let's see, what else did I want to touch upon? Is there any reason that the guys that have had a positive experience with Fate, is there a specific reason that you can say why other people should actually try it who haven't tried it yet?
Let's start with Chepe.
Why? There's several reasons why people can try Fate. Among the first is that it helps you be a better role player, because everything is about using qualities of your character, because everything revolves around descriptions. That's what aspects are. And so literally I had Robert Ogre in my second one-shot come in 5 minutes before, last minute. He was able to make a character just after experiencing the system once before in 5 minutes, just by describing what his character.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, so it also trains you to use qualities of your character in your descriptions. For example, if you are really good about wording aspects, if you're kind of tricky, like, say, fastest gun in the West, you can invoke your aspect just by saying it, like, because I'm the fastest gun in the West, shoots this. So it teaches you to start incorporating aspects of your character and descriptions into your actual descriptions. So it does teach people to be a better role player. It's also really good for adjusting to different kinds of styles. I've run round robin with it. I've run different kinds of normal GM relationships. I've run cooperative kind of stuff, and the non-cooperative traditional kind of campaigns with Fate. Not campaigns, one-shots. I only do one-shots with it so far. But so yeah, there's a lot of things. I'm actually more of a simulationist, and Fate actually does suit my style for noir genres, so that's another thing, if you like that. If you are mechanics heavy, then there are Fate supplements more for you. I would refer to Mindjammer or
oh yeah.
I would refer to Mindjammer or Strands of Fate or Strands of Power, and you will get all the crunch that you could ever want. If you just want simple narrative. If you just want simple narrative, you can get that too. So yes, there's
one of the things in Fate is it helps you get out of that dreaded third person that a lot of role players fall into, or quote unquote role players. A lot of gamers will call them, because they're not role playing. When I
come on, don't go there.
No. There are a lot of people that aren't interested in role playing. They're interested in gaming and playing and see everything as a challenge. You know, the aspects kind of bring things and personalize them for you so that you say, you know, my character is the fastest gun in the West. And, you know, just like Chepe said, you know, hey, I'm the fastest gun in the West. Pow! You know, I'll shoot you dead. You know, instead of saying, well, you know, Jameis is the fastest gun in the West, so he'll shoot very quickly. You know, it's easier to transition into that first person, and then you're actually role playing at that point. And then once you're role playing, it just takes off like wildfire from there.
Yeah, but I think you have different gradients.
I think if your character starts to do something despicable, you might want to take on that third person.
So it's not personal then.
Oh, we're staying in first person. How about you, John?
Right. Okay. In terms of reason for actually giving Fate a go, I'd say that in terms of mechanics-wise, obviously it is a very narrative system, and a lot's quite rightly made of that. I'd say in terms of the actual mechanics, it's a very strong core mechanic that is used for pretty much everything in the system. It's very quick and very easy to learn the core mechanics, and once you've grasped that, everything else is very closely sort of linked into that. So you don't have to learn a lot of extra rules that have been bolted onto the top of it. You don't have to read through a 500-page book before you can sort of start role-playing the game. You can very simply, I mean, the Fate Accelerated book is a tiny book, but it's not a separate game. It's just a slightly different build of the same game, and anything you learn in there you can easily take to another Fate game, and it's all in a very slim book, so it's very quick, very easy to pick up and learn, especially if you've got people who are maybe new to role-playing, or they've had some bad experiences with the systems, and you just want to get them into a game and get them enjoying themselves and actually role-playing. And that's what I think the main strength of the system is. It's quick to get in, and as James said, once you get in and you start that role-playing, it's then much easier to sort of snowball that and keep going with it.
One thing that I found about Fate, and this is probably the most difficult thing outside of the aspects, the most difficult thing is to get players to verbalize which one of the 4 actions that they're trying to do. Because, you know, you'll have people, all right, my guy is going to swing from the chandelier, he's going to shoot his musket while he has his rapier out, and he's going to land in an acrobatic pose and then, you know, slice a Z in someone's chest. It's like, okay, well, what are you doing? Are you attacking? Are you defending? Are you overcoming? Or are you creating an advantage? With those 4 actions, you can pretty much do everything, but you have to make sure you know which of those actions that you're trying to do. And of those actions, the most difficult and the most confusing one for a lot of new players is to create an advantage.
I actually found a way to work around that.
Shoot.
Share it.
You reword it. You don't say create an advantage, just say create an aspect.
Okay, so that goes back to my Marvel heroic, because I like the terms, you know, the asset and complications from there. So you create an asset, which is something that's beneficial to you. You create a complication is when you put something on another person. But yeah, create it.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I do have to admit to not really understanding why advantage was used rather than aspect in terms of the wording. I can see it flows a bit better in terms of the sentence, you know, create an advantage. It's normally something positive that's going to benefit you, but I don't understand why they didn't go with the aspect terminology once it's already been established. Because like James, I found that newer players to it do struggle with sort of grasping it, but once you've explained to them, it's just you're just creating like a one-use aspect or a multiple-use aspect that you're sort of attaching to a person, a scene, or whatever. Once they've got that, they then start using it much more to sort of set up things in advance before they get into that combat or that scene or whatever, and it becomes a lot easier. It's just getting over that initial hurdle again.
Yeah,
well, how cool is it that you can roll to create a description of the setting and the world? Like, that's an actual action you can take.
But even from a
good.
strategic
I mean, if you're talking about player agency and
Exactly.
balancing it out, you
Yeah.
roll to do it. Like,
But
that's
even
really
from a
cool.
strategic standpoint, if you're a grognard and you're saying, okay, I am going to beat John's ogre that he put up here, so I am going to, I'm going to create an advantage of, I know this mystic sword technique, or I'm going to do this kata that's going to empower my sword or whatever. So you roll and you create that advantage. Now you have not just narrative agency, but you have mechanical agency based off of that narrative. And now you can, you can have people do teamwork. Like I think that's big in Atomic Robo, where you have a bunch of people creating advantages for one person, and then the one guy just kind of hits the giant and knocks him out with one blow because they shot him out of a cannon and he's wearing an adamantium head, skull cap, or there's all sorts of stuff, advantages that you create that you can down even the biggest creatures in just one hit. But players kind of shy away from the creating advantage because it's easier to fall into the I attack, which is so anti-Fate.
Well, I'm going to jump in here real quick to first to answer the question of why it's not called create aspect, because the create advantage action actually does 3 things, not just creating a new aspect.
Sure.
So that's why it's not simply just create an aspect. So it's very easy to because like from my background with Dresden Files RPG, which is technically the 3rd system of Fate, it's called it's called create a maneuver in that sense, and it's only creating an aspect basically. There's separate actions to do the other things that are in create an advantage in Fate Core. So that's the reason why it's not just called create an aspect. And to answer the other question,
is that simplified, or is it further complicated? The version now, because I never played Dresden the maneuver.
I just think you're just trying to streamline things, and instead of having 3 different separate types of actions to do similar things, they just kind of lumped it all together, so that you always know, if I'm creating an advantage, I'm manipulating aspects in some way, whether I'm creating one, whether I'm discovering one, or whether I'm taking advantage of one that I know to exist, essentially. You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
DFRPG, it's you have to do an assessment or have a declaration.
A declaration, okay.
Or create a maneuver to do the same things that create advantage do, basically. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Fate-specific terms thrown around in like 2 sentences, and I'm certain someone got lost in the middle of that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's all right.
We need to dial it down back from 11.
Stop being so jargony.
Right,
right. Declaration is one of the biggest things I feel in Fate, because players have to realize that they have skin in the game in creating a great story. It's not just, okay, the GM sets everything up and then I spoon feed you players everything else. It's you as a player need to reciprocate, and you need to give me ideas, and you need to tell me what's important to your character. So you need to basically, you can make declarations. Dave is really good at the declarations and allowing us as players to say, well, what kind of sword do you have? Well, it's a moon steel weapon that was created and it glows in the moonlight. It's not giving it any mechanical factor, but now I just made a declaration of what my warrior sword is, so now it's special. He knows that my sword is special to me, so now he can complicate my life by having someone steal it or have someone come try to beat me up or whatever the deal is.
Well, that just adds more to the world. You just added something else to the world that I, didn't think of.
But that's like me, you telling me, all right, Dave's the GM. He's like, all right, Jim, you got hit for 5 points of damage. That sucks. And you say, well, what happens? Well, I got hit for 5 points of damage. What do you mean what happens? Dave, you just said I got hit for 5 points of damage. Well, describe it. Well, he hit me in the chest for 5 points of damage. No, that sucks. Give me an explanation of what happened. Did he slice your abdomen? Did he, slap your hand and break a finger? Did he hit you in the jaw, causing stinging pain? What did he do? And part of that is the declaration. The players need to know that they have the ability to affect the story and the game world that they're in. It's just not, they're not passengers, they're co-drivers.
Well, to answer David's original question that took us down all this, which
Did I start this? Okay.
Down the rabbit hole.
which I haven't had a chance to answer, is the reason why I like Fate, got into it, and would suggest it to anybody, is what we've been discussing, which is the idea of the amount of narrative power that the Fate system has, that it gives to the GM, that it gives to the players, and that allows everyone around the table to really create this story. People around the community like to debate the concepts of sandbox versus railroad and all this sorts of thing. But to me, when I play Fate, those concepts, those ideas feel irrelevant, because we are telling a story, and the story is being created all around us, and everything everybody does is being responded to, reacted to. So even if you have an idea of, we have to accomplish something, there's a mission, there's a thing that we need to do, how that's going to get accomplished, and is it going to take the same form as the GM thought originally? Well, who knows? So that's my answer. Sorry, guys.
Well,
I think...
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think we're sort of bringing, in terms of the players letting the GM know what they're interested in seeing in a game, that very much sort of circles back round to talking about aspects as we were originally, because if someone's created an aspect where it says, oh, I'm in trouble with the mob, or I'm on the run from the mob, I can sort of instantly go, all right, well, they're interested in a story that involves their character in organised crime.
Absolutely.
And that's just with them creating, like, their sort of main aspects. You can just look down the aspects of your player characters, and so instantly you can start pulling out stuff that you can fold back into your game, and they must be interested in it, otherwise why in the hell would they put it on their aspect sheet in the first place?
Yes, very true.
And that's one of the things I really like about the set, the system.
Let me ask a question, because I've struggled with this too. I like to create a lot of settings. Not everyone likes the settings that I create, but I love them all. So of course. So as players, do you think that it is better to not have a real story and kind of get your players together and kind of develop the story from there, so that it's all driven by what the players want? Or do you think it's better to say, okay, I have a skeleton of a story that I want to tell, and I want you people, my players, to kind of build onto that skeleton? Or do you think I should just put the body together and say, hey, join this Fate group and we're going to run through this, and I try to incorporate, your aspects and things like that into my story? I think the latter is the most difficult, and then the players feel like a disconnect there. But I'm really concerned about the first two. What's the best way to say, all right, the 8 of us are going to get together. What do you guys want to do? Hey, I want to do Flash Gordon. Hey, I want to do Journey to the Middle of the Earth. Okay, so can we make a Flash Gordon universe kind of in the middle of the Earth? Yeah, let's make it steampunk. Okay, great. I want these guys with lightsabers. Lightsabers? Okay, and then it kind of goes around the table until we build the world. And then you make your characters built off the world, because then they can have ties, and then you go from there. Or do I, as the GM, need to give it some amount of direction? What's best?
Well, consider, I think Fate Core has mentioned this too, but I definitely live it in DFRPG. There's an entire chapter, it's chapter 3 in your story, from the core books for DFRPG, Dresden Files RPG. It talks about city creation. And it spends a great deal of time talking about the idea that it's a collaborative process. So everybody, I see you, Jarl. I see you. I'll stop talking now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to keep talking, and you're going to understand eventually. But it talks about the city creation being a collaborative effort. I mean, we already know that we're sitting down to play a Dresden Files style game, but we don't know what city you might be in. We don't know what might be happening. Or the GM might come into it and say, I have these ideas. Are you buying into it? Great. Let's flesh it out. Give me all your feedback. Not to pitch my own stuff, but in my How the Outsiders Stole Christmas game that I ran recently, I said, okay, this is going to be about how outsiders, these extra-dimensional beings, stole Santa Claus. It turned out to, in the end, the villain was something totally different because the players hated this one guy, and I just kept having him come back into it, basically. So it's stuff like that is how the collaborative process that I think Fate encourages can really help when you're starting to sit down to say, what are we playing? You just say, hey, this is my ideas, but let's build on it, and then everybody builds into it.
Well, I think that pulls players into the game more when they have something invested in the game. You know, instead of them just sitting down and
running through against the slave lords modules.
Well, yeah, you know, and like Posey, you're quiet, so I'm gonna bug you, man. I got a question for you.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't think you've had really too much experience with Fate type of games, right? Is that true?
I have never played in a Fate game.
Okay, see, that's why I invited you, because I know that we're throwing around a lot of jargon and stuff, and Lloyd alluded to that. But the thing is that that's why I'm gonna make it a point to try to get you in one of my Fate games, so that I want to actually get a kind of like an unbiased, unblemished, viewpoint of how this all works. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is that does sitting down with the other players in the game, okay, and either building upon an idea that the GM has presented to you, or actually all of the players, including the GM, coming together, including yourself, and building a world together. I mean, do you think that would be of any more interest to you as a player than just, having the GM say, okay, we're going to run this module here, Attack on the Serpent's Citadel, Does that even have any kind of emotional response from you as a player? I know all players are different, but just, in your experience, would that even be something to pull you into a game?
Well, I think yes and no.
Okay.
And I think it depends on. Like, I recently just played a game called Linkmar, and Linkmar was a setting that every single person at the table knew nothing about. However, there is lots of literature stemming from the 1930s till the 1990s, full of this very rich setting. And this can kind of inform character creation and drive like a certain aspect of who your character might be, that he lives in this city. And that was great, and we had a lot of really good role-playing stem from that. But the thing is, when you're creating a world and you're able to give certain aspects and to impart on it, it's always going to be a compromise between you and other people. And I feel like maybe a lot of that can actually be put more towards how you want your own character to be, who tries to overcome a certain setting, or who really tries to live or to survive. I'm not necessarily a person who would strive to want to do Flash Gordon with lightsabers myself. And if I was a player and there were two people at the table who wanted to play Flash Gordon with lightsabers, and I wanted to do something newer, although now that I say that it's newer too, I'm thinking Blade Runner. So maybe I just don't have enough experience doing it, because if I was playing a game like Blade Runner that has lightsabers, maybe that would be amazing.
But isn't it a compromise? Basically, you're kind of going around and you're adding things that you may want in the story, and I add things that I may want in the story, and somebody may shoot my idea down. I have to have a thick skin, and say, well, is this something that I really want, or is it kind of, and as we go around, I'll build off of your ideas.
You see, I know myself as a person, and I wouldn't necessarily go for what I want. And I might go for something that I think would be very challenging to try and do, because I would want to push myself for what I'm possible of doing. And then to have someone push that down, of course you would have to.
No.
Everyone likes like when you're doing improv to say yes and to just go with it.
Well, isn't that the improv mantra? Always say yes. Isn't that what?
Of course, I can retort yes, but here.
Nice.
I've been period.
The thing is also I want to say having a very rich historical setting to draw from is very nice too. Although I don't have a lot of myself experience doing what you guys are talking about for me to give a honest, valid opinion about it.
You will.
Okay,
That's coming.
Let me ask a question. You said something about Lankmar, and that's Favored in the Grey Mouser, right? Is that
yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So the city of Lankmar, how would you describe it if you had to give 2 descriptions? What's description 1 and description 2?
Den of Iniquity.
Well, you see, here's the thing.
That's good. Good.
I think it's nice to ask for descriptions, but although I've played in the city of Lankmar, and I say that it's very rich, it doesn't mean that I've necessarily looked and investigated the city itself. I've looked at a couple locations and been informed by what those locations represent. Like, there are silver merchants in the city, and the silver merchants run a certain type of guild, and they have a certain type of operation. So I could say some parts of the cities are organized, and their economy is based upon factions and guilds. Therefore, there's a lot of political intrigue.
There you go.
And you know what? It really doesn't matter that you don't have detailed knowledge. It's probably better that you don't, because if you don't, it's a living, breathing, agile, and adaptable system, so that you can start to add things to it.
I think it would be a reverse bell curve. So in the beginning, not knowing a lot, still advantageous. You know too much, you get bogged down. But once you know tons, it becomes free again. That's what I would suspect.
So that's why you want to say, okay, it's a den of iniquity, and what was the other one that they said? That someone said?
I said a city full of rats or something like that. I don't know.
So just say you take that. So why is it a den of iniquity? Because everyone's freaking crooked. Everyone's trying to kill each other. Why are they trying to kill each other? As you adventure through, you'll uncover the priest sect. You'll uncover the northerners sect. You'll uncover the wizard that Grey Mouser was training with, and why he's called Grey Mouser, because he's in between the black and the white, and I can't remember, I haven't read it in such a long time, but you'll uncover those things, and then they'll get aspects, and then they'll open up different organizations, and then you go from there.
That's why it's good to have players who have no preconceived notions about it. Because when you ask for a description, what did the city, how did your character experience the city? What did your character do in the city? What did it look like from your character's perspective? And as the player's describing that or talking about that, you can just pluck the aspects out of air, Yeah. And
the approach we took when we started doing your campaign, that's a Fate thing, is that right? So we all sat down.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Because I really enjoyed that. I thought it was great. And I was like, wow, this is really clever. I've never seen this before.
And not only that,
how good that was. So if this is Fate, then I'm definitely on board.
I think that when we sat down, we did the social contract, it sounded a lot like what you guys were talking about with your Fate.
Okay.
We were sitting discussing about the type of game that we wanted to have.
But it also allows you to build characters that are tied to the world and have a reason for being, and not just a reason for being, but like Dave said earlier, a reason for adventuring together. These people that, back when I was in high school, or I think it was high school, when the Dragon magazine came out with the anti-paladin. I think I may have been a freshman in high school. But, it came out and everyone wanted to be an anti-paladin. So, we play in these groups and, like, what class are you? I'm not going to say. And there's all this secretive nature and they're trying to kill and backstab, steal treasure. Well, that's high school. That's not really fun. Well, it's not fun for me, I can say. It's fun for someone, but it's not fun for me. I'd rather have, Lloyd's character has a secret, he's got children out of wedlock all over. He leaves children in his wake wherever he goes or something like that.
Too close to home.
So that, as a table, we can kind of bring it up. My character in David's campaign is half elvish blade master kind of guy. He's a fighter. And he and Lloyd kind of go back and forth and mess around with each other and insult each other, all in good fun. But we are the front line for our group. We're the fighters of our group, and it's good.
Let me throw this out, guys. We don't have too much time left. For the guys that have had some Fate experience, can you maybe toss out a couple of your favorite either supplements or genres that you would recommend or that you enjoy?
Ooh.
Because that might also draw people. Oh, you can do this with it. Oh, See where I'm going with this.
So obviously, if anyone's watched anything I've done, I love the Dresden Files role-playing game. So that was my introduction to Fate, actually, which is why I went and got all the Fate Core stuff, and I'm going to buy supplements for that soon.
Hey, John, how does that compare to, like, Mage? I know they're totally different, but I like Mage.
So here's the great thing about it. The magic system in the Dresden Files role-playing game, I want to use it for everything, because it is amazing. Because basically, it just says, all it says is, there's these two big concepts in magic that you use, and there's a little bit of a breakdown of specialization, and that's it. Anything you can think of, as long as that anything you can think of, you can do, assuming you have the mechanical ability to do so. So it has that element of Mage that I love, but the mechanics are a lot easier. They're Fate, so it's a lot easier and just fun, and I love it. So that's one of the reasons to get Dresden Files role-playing game, is that if you love magic systems, it's got a great one. If you're a fan of Dresden Files, it's very honest to the material. The books themselves are all written in character, which is hysterical. You get these very funny annotations from different characters from the novels in it. So that's a great one. I also want to pick up this one that I saw advertised the other day, The Secret of Cats.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if anyone's played it. I haven't played it, but I want
to. It's free right now, isn't it? It should be a pay what you want model.
I think yeah. So I got to grab it.
It's on drive-through.
Yeah. Okay. So those are two good examples, I think, of supplements of actual settings that you can use.
Jeffy, what about you, man? Go.
Go.
Who is it? Me?
You. Yeah, you're up.
Oh. Okay. So I will say this, and I will always say this. Fate is my favorite system to run anything with a noir bent to it, which includes Dresden Files. Yep. Noir bent is kind of, your typically mystery cop unfolding kind of thing. So I have World of Dew, which is a samurai noir game based on historical Edo period. Edragor, which basically takes the idea of fate, because you actually have fate points, fate, and it weaves that into a Native American-themed fantasy world. So you're literally invoking your own fate, describing your own fate with your aspects. Yes, I'm gonna try to run it. I'm gonna try to run a 3 off of that soon.
Well, I said I wanted to be in that one. I think I said I was interested. So
yeah, that one looks pretty good.
If it's good, I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah. But Fate, to put it into perspective, with Fate Accelerated, I ran a steampunk dystopian planetary romance one-shot and a neo-Victorian biopunk, what was the other? Oh, Dark Deco neo-Victorian biopunk Paris. Both of those are on my channel. If you want to figure out what those are, you'll learn rather quickly. I made up the setting.
Yeah, he is the niche master. Yeah.
Yes, I am the niche master, the niche bestie. So you can do a lot of things with Fate, especially anything with heavy character interaction and very noir bend. That's what I like Fate for.
Pathfinder with it. There's a great type in Google, anybody, if you're interested. Type in Pathfinder Fate. It's a great conversion to Fate Accelerated. That's Pathfinder oriented, and it's awesome. I've read through it. I played a little bit of a play-by-post with it once, so it's really cool. Check that out. It's free. It's online. Just Google it.
John, what about
I'm
you, man?
really interested in the conversion for Fate and Eclipse Space because I think it might make
yeah,
it easier.
That's what I was
Absolutely,
thinking about. Right? Yeah.
Oh,
It's called Mindjammer. That's
Yeah, it is. You're right. Yeah, you are right.
Oh bloody hell!
there's
Yeah.
already a game. They're
Yeah,
doing
right?
space in it, but there's already a game that does transhuman space.
Yes, fine.
Mindjammer. John has a
John's got
review of
John's
it.
got it.
So if you're interested,
John's
we
got it,
already have a
okay.
complete game.
He's got it right.
John, didn't you do a review on it too, right? I thought.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John, what are your? You have any recommendations?
Okay. In terms of like settings, there's probably 3 that I really like. There's one by Wordplay Games, which is called Age of Arthur, which is set in a sort of Celtic version of the sort of Arthurian Britain, and that's quite cool. That's a little bit pre the sort of release of like Fate Core as it currently stands, but that's quite cool. There's Jade Punk, which I'm running at the minute, which is sort of like a cross between a sort of dystopian sort of cyberpunky setting with kung fu martial arts touting the badasses and a bit of Wild West thrown in there for good measure.
Stop.
And just because we were talking about sort of D&D conversions, I've also got the Fate Freeport Companion as well, which I've not actually got around to running yet, but seems quite reasonable.
I wanted to get that. Have you read it? Is it any good?
I've read it. It seems perfectly playable. It all seems quite good. I mean, it seems like they've taken the overall concepts behind sort of Freeport and the sort of D&D style setting, rather than trying to do a strict conversion. 'Cause it always worries me when anyone says, "Oh, we're going to do a conversion of X to Y," that they're going to try and port across the game mechanics, which sort of defeats the point, really.
Right, exactly.
They do seem to have gone for, oh, we're just going to try and use Fate to capture the same sort of feeling and the same sort of setting. So that looks quite good, and I'd quite like to run that. But yeah, they'd probably be the 3 I'd go for: Age of Arthur, Jade Punk, and the Fate Freeport Companion.
I was thinking about picking that one up, the 3.1, just to get it and run it. So I think I might do that too. Put it on my list.
What about you, James? You got any that you have played or want to?
I would love, and I tried to do some conversions. I would love a Fate Rifts. I know Palladium would never release any names or images or anything else like that, but Rifts, the universe in Rifts was so rich and it had so much excellent detail. It was just a shame that the system sucked.
Oh, you wanted to do a setting book? I mean, you could do that with Fate already, since anything is pretty much possible in Rifts. Just describe something, and you're pretty much playing a Rifts character.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do that, Fate. Mechanically, you don't really have to change anything. I guess you just need a setting book.
That would be the best. And then also, I kind of like Kitchen Sink. There's a game years and years ago called Worlds of Creation, and basically the premise was you start off as like a normal person, and then weird stuff begins to happen. You cross time, space, dimensions, everything else, and as you get more powerful, as you do things, you get more powerful up until you're able to create your own little pocket dimensions. Now, that's a little way off the reservation at that point, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the Rifts thing, where you have the ability to have a wizard next to a bot character who's a cyborg or a technomancer, with some psychic power and stuff like that thrown in. So I like the kitchen sink type of deals.
I mean, in terms of the Rifts that you're on about, I'm pretty much doing the same at the minute with a lot of GURPS supplements that I've got. Because although I'm not such a mad fan of the GURPS rules as they are, like I say, they work absolutely fine. They're just not my particular cup of tea. But a lot of the supplements, particularly the historical ones, like the GURPS Imperial Rome, are really well researched, and they're chock full of like background information that's it doesn't matter about the game stats. So a lot of those I've picked up purely for the point of going, I could easily run a Fate game set in Rome just by like copy and pasting the background out of this into a standard Fate system or Fate accelerated.
I was actually going to ask that because I've been working on these historical one-shots, so they're set in various times throughout the world, and like I'm using D&D 5e because it's the only system I know, but I definitely think after this conversation that Fate seems like a much better system for that. You know, like D&D is not perfect for a historical story. You know?
Everything.
Yeah.
I will say that Fate is probably one of the easiest systems to port to because all you have to do is describe stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a point in history, just know about the point of history, start making aspects for it,
Yeah.
you're done.
Just write 20 pages of Word doc of your setting, and boom, you're done. Mechanics take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And the historical games are great. There was a game called Legendary Journeys, I believe, Legendary Quest. It was some indie guy, probably about 15 years ago, put it out. And, you know, there are a lot of terms. I consider myself a pretty good historian. Or pretty well versed in history, but you know there were terms and classes and things like that that were awesome. David ran Savage Solomon Kane for us, and unfortunately it didn't take root because the other players, you know, oh, I don't know history. Well, it's like super crazy history. It's not a historical fact. It's, you know, it's a mystical or whatever you want to kind of area. But that would have been great. You know, you go to Greece and go fight harpies, and you know you go to Russia and Baba Yaga is there trying to tear your heart out or steal your kids, and you know you go to Japan and you're fighting the fox Kazumis. You know, there's I mean that's awesome. That would be awesome. You know, and just have it tied together somehow. You know.
All right, well, I want to thank you guys again. Appreciate it, especially you guys that are up in the wee hours of the morning. And hopefully we'll all get a chance to game. You know, I know everybody's schedules are crazy and everything, but I'll make sure that I try to keep prodding and poking away at until I can get you guys get you guys in a game with me, one way or the other. You know.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't played before, just any of us that have experience, you know, John, Chepe, David, James, myself, if you're interested in a game or just want to play, you know, email one of us, you know, Facebook one of us. One of us will be around to play even just a one-shot on an odd day with you guys, just to have some fun. So, because we love Fate.
Yes, and if you suggest random settings.
There's a neat guy in there for you.
Yeah, Chepe will make it happen.
That's it.
Okay.
He'll be all over that.
You want transhuman boxing ring? You got it.
There you go. All right.
Like, I'm just saying.
All right. Well, you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll talk to you later.
Good evening, guys.
And thanks
Take care,
everybody
guys.
for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Bye.